Happy Saturday and welcome to October. And thank you for joining me for Empowering Her with Monica. So it's October, and not only are we celebrating Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so I wanted to share with you just some information on domestic violence. So, from one queen to another, I'm just trying to help and save a life, maybe. So, all month long, I'm going to be sharing information. And so, stay tuned. Okay. So, domestic violence has existed in almost all societies throughout history. The origin of domestic violence is a result of the development of patriarchal and hierarchical systems of authority. In these systems, males controlled all property, and women and children were considered as the property of men. Now, these systems, patriarchy and hierarchy, gave way to the belief that males are superior, and this belief formed the basis for women's subordination. And this comes from a report in the Journal of International Women's Study. The belief in men's superiority and domination over women has been supported by economic, social, cultural, and religious institutions, which made it acceptable for men to use violence to control women. These institutions and laws supported a man's right to control his wife by force all the way through the end of the 19th century. So, let me give you some examples of some laws that have existed over the years. So, there's the first one I want to talk about is in the 1500s, there was what they call the marital exemption for rape. So, which means that a man could rape his wife or force her to have sex with him, and there was nothing she can do about it. It's not considered rape if they're married. Wow. The Code of Hammurabi was put into play in the 1800s, and it decreed that a wife must be submissive to her husband, and that a man can punish any member of his household for anything he considered was disobedience. Wow. The medieval canon law allowed women to be punished publicly, and sometimes this would include a iron muzzle over their mouth that often had spikes, that stuck in her tongue, and they would put her out in public to stand for other people to see. In case y'all didn't know, that's called humiliation, but okay, that's another topic for another day. In Renaissance France, they limited the discipline of wives and children to physical abuse that did not result in death. But at the same time, they said that a man who is not master of his wife is not worthy of being a man. What? So in other words, don't kill her, but beat her as bad as you want to, just long as she doesn't die. Really? So, have you ever heard of the rule of thumb? So, I don't know if this is exactly true, but there's a rumor, and I've read it several times, that in the 1700s, that England passed a law that allowed a man to chastise his wife with a whip, as long as it could be the size of his thumb. It could not be any larger than the size of his thumb. And that was so that he could enforce domestic discipline. Yeah. So this went on from 1500s all the way up into the late 1900s. Wow. That men were allowed to discipline women and control them with force. It wasn't until the late 1960s and 70s that during the women's liberation movement that domestic violence became recognized as a social issue. It was because of the work of women advocates that in 1971, the first women's shelter opened. In 1972, the first hotline for battered women opened in St. Paul, Minnesota. In 1976, Nebraska became the first state to abolish the marital rape exemption. So that means that the husbands could no longer rape their wives or force them to have sex. Yay, Nebraska. Pennsylvania became the first state to create a statute providing orders of protection for victims of domestic violence. So that was in 1976 as well. So protective order, or TPOs as they're called now, those came into play in 1976 in Pennsylvania. It wasn't until 1979 that the first congressional hearing on the issue of domestic violence was held. Wow. So now all these laws have been passed, telling men, giving them control and authority to rule and discipline women. But then it took until 1979 for you to get together and talk about the issue of domestic violence. In 1980, spousal abuse became a separate offense in only 10 states. Sisters, I submit to you that domestic violence is not only a social issue, it's a health issue. Victims of domestic abuse, in most cases, continue to suffer long after the abuse is over. Packing a bag and walking out the door does not mean it's over. Survivors of domestic abuse, victors, whatever you want to call them, or that you call yourself, they have to work to put their and possibly their children's lives back together while they are working to heal mentally, physically, emotionally, and financially. This is no easy job. This work is not easy. Not easy at all. So I'm going to ask you this month to please wear purple. If you know someone who may be possibly in an abusive relationship, send them to my website at daylightinc.org, or share my video or anybody's video on domestic abuse with them, because they deserve better. They do not have to stay in an abusive relationship. So thank you again for joining me. I'm here to stay, y'all. I'm going to be around all month. And so hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, and in any social media platform at I Am Daylight. I would love to hear what you think about my videos, and tell me if there's something I haven't talked about yet and you want to hear about it, let me know. Thank you for joining me for Empowering Her with Monica.